Let's try a painting with an alizarin crimson background. Darkest spot on this painting is the front of this barn. So I'm using a mixture of red iron oxide by Rembrandt and ultramarine blue. This is my go-to dark. So it's always a good idea to identify your darker value first. And with oil paints, it's easier to paint in the darker value first. Because this is a 6x8, I'm using, not actually sure, it might be a 0 ivory filbert. Now the first part of the painting is always the block in, which is what I'm doing now. You might be watching and thinking, well, she's getting a little meticulous for a block in, and that would be true. But I don't want to get this all muddy. I want to make sure I get this shadow in. So I've distracted myself long enough, and it's time to block in the mountains. So I'm outlining where the trees are going to be. It's usually a good idea to make your strokes in the direction of the mountains to show the slant. Now what I'm using right now is yellow ochre with a little bit of ultramarine blue. Now down below here, there's a lot of grasses. Now remember, you can always leave things out of your painting. So in my scene, I'll put that up right now. In my scene, there's like a tractor right here in this little spot and like the back end of a truck. And I think it'd be very difficult to get that painted in that it would be understandable. So in this case, I'm gonna leave it out. Okay, I'm gonna get these trees blocked in here. They're not quite this dark, but that's okay because I'm going to paint over them. This is a mixture of ultramarine blue and cad yellow medium. There's a tree over on this side that's a little bit lighter than these trees over here. You might see me picking hairs off my brush. That's because I have a German Shepherd who likes to sit in here and his hair goes everywhere. Now this is a really big tree. The difference with this green is it's still the ultramarine blue and cad yellow medium, but I added a little alizarin crimson to dull it. And then I'm going to come back over this with some lighter colors. But this tree does come up and it sort of meets the top of this mountain, but it's always a good idea to stop short of, you don't want one thing running into another exactly. So stop short or take it just a little bit above, which is what I'm going to do in this case. Now another thing is when you're lightening a green, try not to use white, just use a little bit more yellow because white will really dull your paint and it doesn't look real. So this needed to be a little darker. So I added a little bit more ultramarine blue. And then right here, this gets really short. So I'm switching over to my little liner brush that makes things easier. And to this mixture, I added some more cad yellow medium and red iron oxide because I want to show some lighter spots on these trees. Now one thing I'm noticing on these trees is this actually looks more like ultramarine blue, which is not what I want. I'm going to take my color and add back some ultramarine blue to make it dark. I want the darker part to be on the bottom, but I want it to look more normal, and I've got to have a sort of a mixture of colors in these trees to make it look natural. And it always helps to add red to green, which is what I've done. Sometimes I add the red iron oxide. I've mentioned before it's my favorite color for many different purposes. So I kind of like the way that looked. I do want a little darker here. Then on this tree, there's a lot more lighter color up top. There's more dog hair. So I've used cobalt blue and cad yellow light. And it's not going to be this bright because I'm going to paint over it with some other colors. It's more at an angle. And I added some ultramarine blue here because I wanted this to be a little darker. Now sometimes it really helps if you can get your values kind of mapped in. And right above this green is kind of a very light grass that looks almost white. So I'll dance around that a little bit. You might be wondering, what on earth is this all about? Well, this is actually an Arroyo. We were driving on the way to the beach, and it's at quite near, actually a little north of Arroyo Grande, which is a very big arroyo. And this is where flash floods have kind of carved it out, and they're actually kind of spooky and beautiful looking all at the same time. I'm using a little bit of my barn mixture up here to add the brown that you do see in some of the grasses over this way. Now, one thing you might be thinking is, what about color temperature? And to be honest, that's kind of the last thing I really think about when I'm painting. But I am thinking about it right now because this is pretty warm overall. And in truth, this scene was very warm. I think it was like 90, I mean, not temperature wise, but on this day it was 98 or something, and we were so glad we were going to the beach. But everything's all dried out. Now the purpose of the under painting is you're actually supposed to leave parts of it visible. They say that this is a sign of an amateur who can't do that, so I guess I qualify. Keep in mind though that I want to get some color. I want to get some other colors kind of in there. I'm going to get this covered up. I might come back to it later to add a little tractor if I'm feeling clever. Now on the mountain, if you look at the photograph, there's kind of a line. I'm gonna kind of try to imply that because I think it'll give the mountain more interest. Now these two colors are just way too different because here I used basically blue and yellow, and the mountains are more kind of brownish. So this is the red iron oxide with just a little bit of blue to dull it, and that's better. This is a mixture of red iron oxide and yellow. I don't want that to look too thick. Well, this is the point sometimes where you think, I'm messing this up. But you know, they tell you not to be precious. They don't think you should, whoever they is, say don't be afraid to paint over any part of your painting. Be brave. What I'm doing, or trying to do, is imply the crevices in the mountain. This brush and that other ivory filbert are my favorite brushes for these tiny paintings. So I need to finish over here. It's a little too dark. Now this part is supposed to be the bottom of this arroyo, but this green actually reaches up through it. So I'm just sort of filling in, but I'm gonna bring this green up. And I'm gonna use the same green that I used right down here, just adding white to it. And like I said, don't ever do this. But that's kind of the effect I want to get. So now when you're in the distance, you want to be more vague, and you'll make horizontal strokes. So moving on to the sky, and I'm using cerulean blue with white. I'm actually pushing the color a little bit because it's not really this dark. But a lot of times that's what you have to do to get a decent painting. In this case, I'm going to try to leave a little bit of my pink underpainting because I think that'll give it a little vibration. It's always darker at the top, so if you're going to get it darker, that's where you get it darker. Another trick is you don't want the sky and the mountain to be precise. You want a little bit of blurring of the lines. It's okay to kind of drag your sky color over your mountain. And you will see a lot of colors in your sky. So pink, it's okay to put pink in. It's okay to put yellow. So a couple of things. One is this and this is the same color. And if you look at the painting, if you look at the photo, they're not the same. Okay, so here's my final painting.